الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمه مصطفى، علي لطوانت وبدي عمر. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. أنا يا بلادي راني عارف هما ما كانوش عارفين،
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف، احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين. نموت على النيف والشرف، نموت على الوطن والدين، علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف، احنا هما الجزائريين. أنا يا بلادي على بالي هما ما كانوش فاهمين،
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي، حسبونا ماناش قادرين. فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع للجميلة تونسى الأخرين، من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدي نساو رجال حرين. أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين،
واش نذكر واش نخلي شهداء رواحهم طاهرين، مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي، ربي يرحمهم أجمعين. والقصبة مازالها ديالي وسط الدار والعرس واقفين.
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم
قرصان رياس وساطيل، على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم،
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين
باللي الجزائر ماهيش ليهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين،
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم، ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس. كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Jazair Hope platform. Thank you for being here. Today we have with us Mr. Ilan Papi. As you certainly know, he is a historian. He is currently a professor of history in Exeter University. He has obtained his BA degree from Hebrew University in Jerusalem in 1997 and his PhD from the University of Oxford in 1984. He has founded and directed the Academic Institute for Peace and in Givat Haviva, Israel, between 1992 and 2000, and was the chair of the Emil Tuma Institute for Palestine Studies in Haifa between 2000 and 2006. Professor Pape was a senior lecturer in the Department of Middle Eastern History and the Department of Political Science in Haifa University in Israel between 1984 and 2006. And he has been appointed as the chair in the Department of History at the Cornell Campus 2007-2009 and became a fellow of the IAIS in 2010. He focuses mostly on Middle East, in particular the history of Israel and Palestine. He has written a lot of books. So today I have planned to have a discussion basing on a few of his most popular books. And of course, we will relate while speaking about these books to the current situation. Mr. Ilan, it's really an honor to have you in our platform tonight.
Thank you very much, Fethi. I'm really honored and pleased to be with you on this platform, and wish the platform and you great success in the future.
Thank you. You told me that you are in Palestine. How is it going? How do you feel the situation?
Well, it's very grave. First of all, whether you are here or outside of Palestine, I think today it's difficult to ignore what's going on in the Gaza Strip. I think that every day brings another pictures, information. I have many friends in the Strip with whom I talk, and it seems that the genocidal policy of Israel continues, and it's heartbreaking to hear, and also helpless to feel that there's nothing you can do right now to stop it. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin, because I'm a Jew and I know my society in Israel very well, I'm as much as I know that society, I'm still deeply ashamed and disappointed in how racist it has become, how it shows no compassion to the victims in Gaza, supports a war in the north with Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's probably one of the most difficult. I'm nearly 70. I think it's one of the most difficult year in my life. I mean, not personally, but looking around me, both in Israel and in Palestine.
Yeah, that's in fact the feel even outside of Palestine. It's a very grave situation. We look forward that things get better very soon, hopefully. Yeah, inshallah. Yeah. So as I said, Ilan, I have based our discussion on a few of your books, but we will across the discussion we'll try to relate as much as possible to the current situation. So I wanted to start by two of your most popular books. The one is The Idea of Israel, A History of Power and Knowledge, where you have debunked the way Zionism operates. And the second one, The Forgotten Palestinians, A History of the Palestinians in Israel, where you analyzes the Israeli state policy towards its Palestinian citizens between brackets. We would really appreciate summarizing to our audience those two important perspectives and how they relate to the current situation.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's start with the idea of Israel. The book tries to show how Israel commodifies, how it sells itself outside the world and also to its own society in order to receive support that would allow it to continue with policy, I would say, oppression and colonization towards the Palestinian people. And in the book, The Idea of Israel, I claim that Israel is working from the very beginning, and even before that, the Zionist movement was working very hard to build a narrative that would justify its colonization of Palestine to begin with, and its current policies towards the Palestinians afterwards. And I talk about two very important groups within a society like the Jewish society in Israel that are the one who build the narrative and try to make it acceptable to as many people as possible around the world. One is working intellectually. These are the academics. So I'm trying to show how the academics were helping the Zionist movement and later Israel to build a narrative that, to my mind, is based mainly lies and fabrication, but nonetheless, it looked very serious, very academic, and a lot of the myths that Israel propagated were supported by these academics with supposedly objective analytical work. So one group are the academics, and they build the idea of Israel as the only democracy in the Middle East. They built the idea that Palestine was empty when the Zionists entered, and they build also the image of the Palestinians as terrorists who all they want is to kill Jews and destroy the state of Israel. And that's only part of what they're doing. The second group are the movie people, the cinema people, because they work towards the emotional side, while the academics try to convince you logically that Zionism is morally valid and that the Palestinians are in the wrong. The movie industry tries to do it through the emotions. So I analyze the Israeli film industry and how it impacted also world film industry, because I think it played a very important role in building their consensus support for Israel. Of course, I do claim, and this brings us to today, before I move to the other book, that this building that was built with the help of scholarship and cinema people is not holding in this century. So despite the efforts of academic and despite the efforts of cinema or television people, I think people know too well the reality on the ground, and it's not that easy anymore for Israeli academics to be accepted as serious academics if they continue to support the Zionist narrative. And more of the more cultural milieu in the world is less comfortable with Israeli films that are totally loyal to the Israeli narrative. In fact, the only Israeli films that win some sort of accolades and prizes around the world are those who really seriously challenge the Zionist narrative. It's important for today because what we see today in the international reaction to Israel and its policies in Gaza in the last 3 months is that the civil societies in the world, the societies in general, are totally in support of the Palestinians and are demonstrating in the millions to demand that the government would pressure, governments in plural, would pressure Israel to stop the genocide in Gaza. And yet what we see is that the governments are not doing it. Now, the governments are not doing it not because they were convinced by the works of Israeli academics or because they were convinced by the work of Israeli cinema people. They're doing it for cynical reasons and because there's a strong lobby that makes them work on behalf of Israel. So I think it's very important to understand that a colonialist idea, if you want to maintain a colonialist idea in the 21st century, you need academics and media people, but you also need power for the sake of power. Now, the second book is about a group that is really important, especially for me, is important for the future. 20% of the Israelis citizens are Palestinians who remained after 48. They are misunderstood also in the Arab world. I mean, people in the Arab world sometimes ask them, are you Jews then, if you are Israeli citizens? It's a complicated situation. I think that it's important, first of all, to know that they are the ones who stayed in Palestine, not because they collaborated with anyone, but because they managed to stay, which is great, because otherwise there would be no Palestinians at all in Israel. And secondly, that as the years went by, this group is sometimes facing a far more complicated situation than direct occupation, because they can vote, they can be elected, so supposedly they have civil rights, but as the book shows, this is not really the situation. They really live in a kind of an apartheid system, but not one that can be easily detected, as in the case of apartheid South Africa. So it's more unseen barriers. What I claim in the book, and that again is relevant to our days, is that since the beginning of the 21st century, because of the transformation of the Israeli political system is that most of the Israeli politicians stopped playing the game of democracy anymore. And while they were trying to maintain until the end of the 20th century a balance between being a racist Jewish state on one hand, but also wanting to be a democracy. So they invented this idea that Israel is a Jewish democracy, which is impossible. There is no Islamic democracy, there's no Christian democracy, there's no Hindu democratic state. Democracy is not about religion. Democracy is about human rights and civil rights. But anyway, most of the Israelis don't even want this democracy anymore. They want the Jewish theocratic racist state, and therefore this community, which is now 2 million Palestinians, are in great danger, because that kind of policy, oppressive policy, will not only be directed towards the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but also towards the Palestinians inside Israel. The more positive side of it, I think this is the only Palestinian group that knows the Jewish society in Israel not only as soldiers and settlers. If there's any hope for reconciliation, la musallaha, as they say in Arabic, if there's any chance for musallaha, reconciliation, is through this group, because they know a bit more about the Israeli Jews. Not all of them, of course, are terrible people, and not all of them are soldiers, as I said, and not all of them are West Bank settlers. This is the group that knows very well both societies. So if we want to dream of a future Palestine, a liberated, decolonized Palestine, I would say even de-Zionized Palestine,
Absolutely.
This is the group that would play a crucial role in trying to build something after more than 120 years of conflict.
Absolutely, and I would add to what you said about the difficulty this group of people are facing is their image from outside of Palestine, where a lot look at them as collaborators or traitors or something like that. While as you said, if any hope that we can have, this is the group who can play a crucial role in make it
Absolutely.
happen. Yeah. So in two other books, ladies and gentlemen, meanwhile while we are speaking, I'm displaying the books that we are trying to use in our discussion. In two other books that are extremely also important. One of them is let me just where is it? I lost the track. No, not this one. In two other books, you explained why the failure of the Oslo. The first one, you explained why the failure of the Oslo and the solution of two states. The book is titled "The History of Modern Palestine: One Land, Two People," and the other one is the biggest prison on earth, where you spoke about the annexation and occupation of Gaza and West Bank. In your opinion, how things have evolved from a hope of one land to two people to the biggest open sky prison on earth? And what was that failure? Is it the intrinsic impossibility for such solution of one land, two people, or is it the ideology of the opponent of such solution, which we can broadly call the Zionists?
Yeah. Indeed, what I tried to show in the first book that you mentioned is that until 1948, not only in Palestine, by the way, also in the Mashriq as a whole, probably also in Maghreb as well, that is North Africa, I mean the whole area of North Africa, but definitely in the eastern part of the Arab world, in the Mashriq, Jews lived as a recognized community, and they coexisted in a genuine mean of coexistence with Muslims and Christians. And that's very important to remember. Before 1948, you had one land, and you had more than two people, actually. But you had, at least in Palestine, the two big groups were Jews and Muslims, and the Christians were a bit of a smaller group. But there was a sense that it's possible to live in the same village, definitely in the same town, do businesses together, and so on. So there was a tradition which was not true about the relationship between Jews and non-Jews in Europe up to 45, where anti-Semitism was very rife, that could have created a different kind of Palestine. The problem was the Zionist ideology. I always remind people of a correspondent between two philosophers. Well, one of them is very more than just a philosopher, and that's Mahatma Gandhi of India, who corresponded with Martin Buber, who was a great Jewish philosopher, but also, at least in the beginning, supported Zionism. Buber tried to persuade Gandhi to support Zionism. And Gandhi wrote to him, listen, I don't think the Palestinians mind for Jews to come and live in Palestine. What they don't like is the idea that they want to displace them and replace them. So he said, I cannot, Gandhi, cannot support such an idea of displacement and replacement. And that happened because of the nature of Zionism. And that will explain why eventually it became a big prison. So let me just elaborate a little bit on that. We have, first of all, to begin with the way I think most scholars today would define Zionism, which is a settler colonial movement. In Algeria, people understand very well what settler colonialism means. It's not just a regular colony where you have some people from the empire, like in India, trying to run a colony and then they go out. They, like in Algeria, also the Zionists came in a large number, colonized, settled, and claim that this is part of France, and they claim it's part of a new Jewish state. Now, we know that the most important problem for any settler colonial movement is the presence of the native people. And in many cases, like in North America and Australia, the only way to get rid of the native people was through genocide, or what some scholars would call through the elimination of the native. In Palestine, this ideology was very much part of the Zionist ideology, namely the ideology of a movement of Jews who were running away from Europe. They were refugees from Europe. That's the difference between them and the French settlers in Algeria. They were refugees. They were not welcome in Europe. The Jews were not welcome in Europe. So they came to Palestine and they decided that this would be the new Europe, the new homeland for them. Unfortunately, someone else was already living there, and they didn't hesitate, despite of the fact that they were refugees, to go on this project of displacement and replacement, namely the elimination of the native. So uprooting by force the Palestinians from Palestine was a very important part of Zionist ideology from the very beginning. They didn't have the power to do it until 1948. When the British rule on Palestine ended, there was an historical moment where the Zionist movement could finally translate ideas of ethnic cleansing into an operation of ethnic cleansing. And as we know, within 9 months in 1948, the Zionist movement expelled half of the Palestinian people, destroyed half of the Palestinian villages, destroyed most of the Palestinian towns, and took over something like 78% of historical Palestine. That was in 1948. But most Israeli policymakers after 48 felt that the 78% of Palestine were not good enough to have a viable strategic state. And also from religious national reasons, they believed that the West Bank should be part of Israel because it had these old biblical towns like Hebron and Bethlehem that they thought were the heart of the Jewish nation. So they had to be under Israel. So they used the very particular situation that developed in the June 67 war to occupy the 22% of Palestine that they did not occupy in 1948, namely the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And what I show in the book, The Biggest Prison on Earth, that they had a serious discussion, because I found the documents, they had a serious discussion by saying, why don't we do in 67 what we did in 48? In 48, we got rid of almost 1 million Palestinians. It's very good that we have the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, but what will we do with all these Palestinians? After we expelled so many Palestinians, we are now taking back millions of Palestinians.
Yes.
So at one point they thought maybe they could do another ethnic cleansing, but they decided the situation in 67 was not like 48. So instead of massive expulsion as they did in 48, they created what I call the biggest prison on earth, not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. The idea was this: if I cannot expel millions of people that I don't want them to be citizens, if I cannot expel them, I can at least imprison them, enclave them, and I will give them no civil right. They cannot vote for me. They cannot decide in the decision about the future, and I can control them from the outside. I can, and I talk of the book of two models that Israel developed. One model is the open prison. If you, the Palestinians, are happy to be without citizens' right, without civic right, without human rights, if you are willing to be at the mercy of the Israeli military, we will allow you to work in Israel. We will allow you some autonomy, and we would allow you to stay under these conditions. And we will even one day call it a peace solution. We will call it even a two-state solution. But we are in control. We are in control, and as long as you behave. Yeah. Now, if you don't accept it, and the Palestinians several times did intifadas, uprisings. Yes. In 87, in 2000, even before, there were smaller intifadas. If you resist us, we will impose on you the security, the maximum security model of a prison, right? Then you get collective punishments, destruction of houses, expelling of people, mass arrest without trial, expropriation of land. We will increase the Jewish settlements. We will find a way of punishing you if you don't accept our idea of an open prison. What is so unique about Gaza in two stages, in 2007 and today, what is so unique, and I wrote, just when we speak, Fetri, I wrote a new foreword, which I hope will come out soon, to this book, because I think what happened today in Gaza is another model, the model I didn't think would happen. But until today, the model of Gaza was the worst kind of maximum security prison. Namely, if in 2006, the Palestinians in Gaza elect a government that Israel doesn't like, and they elected democratically, the Hamas, if yes. they elect a government we don't like, we don't only give them the kind of collective punishment that we do in the West Bank. We will do something worse, which is the siege. And I think most of us know what the siege means. When you cannot go out, you cannot go in. Israel determines what you will eat. Israel determines how many medicines you will get. I don't have to tell you. Electricity, water, it's all in the hands of Israel, and they are from the outside. And this is a much worse prison than the regular prison. Now, when the prison rebels, like the Hamas did, then, as we know, for four times, Israel attacked between 2007 until 2023. Israel 4 times attacked the whole Gaza Strip from the air, from the land, from the sea, with air force, with lethal weapons, causing thousands of deaths. And you think about psychologically, what does it mean to live 17 years with such bombardments and assaults? Now, this didn't work either, because we have Operation Tufun al-Aqsa. Suddenly, the people in the prison, the inmates,
yes,
had enough. They don't want it anymore. So they do this operation. What is the Israeli reaction? It's worse than anything we've seen before. It's a fusion of ethnic cleansing, which Israel always did, and genocide. So it's now a terrible mixture that Israel is using to punish the people who were imprisoned in Gaza for the fact that they don't agree to live in this prison anymore. So I think both these books in this respect are relevant.
Yeah. Thank you, Ilan. I would like to just outline a couple of points from what you said now. One is about Gandhi and his support to Palestine. It's really unfortunate that the current government of Modi is giving a full support to Israel. That's clearly unfortunate and sad. I hope that it's not entrancing to India now. We hope that with the next government things will change. And the second point, which is really important, and we as Algerians always mention, is when you spoke about settlers colony or settlers occupation, we in Algeria have hope that one day Palestine will get independent, because they are in their 75 year of fight, while for Algeria it took 132 years. So hope is still there. So yeah, absolutely. And what I also take from what you said is that you have been speaking about genocide since many years, and thankfully currently with the media, almost everybody is aware that it's what's happening in Palestine is indeed the genocide. So this is I will take it as a good development. To move forward, Ilan, another groundbreaking book that you wrote that I'm now displaying on the screen is the 10 myths of Israel. I thought very important that we speak about this, because all the myths have been dismantled with the 7th of October. But let's talk about these 10 myths that you have outlined here in this book.
Yeah. The 10 myth is kind of divided to the 10 most important, I would call them fabrications of history, that granted Israel this big support that it received, especially in the West. And I divided to myths of the past, myths of the present, and myths of the future. In the myths of the past, one of the most famous one, as we know, is the myth that Palestine was a land without people, waiting for people without land. And I always give this example to understand the absurdity of the initial Zionist claim to Palestine, in the example that actually it is like a story of a man who, I don't know, someone will come to you in Algeria, or in Algeria, in the city of Algeria, or in the country of Algeria, and will tell you, excuse me, sir, 2,000 years ago, I used to live in your city, and therefore your city belongs to me because I lived there 2,000. And you think, okay, there's a crazy tourist. Never mind. You give him tea. You say, okay, and you say, I can forget about it because he's crazy, right? But then the next day he comes with the police, and the police says to you, listen, we looked. He has this book which is called the Bible, and it says that 2,000 years ago your house in Algeria was his. We're sorry, at least you have to give him half of the house. And this is exactly the first myth, which is so important. And yet it's surprising how many people accepted it. In international tribunals that decided the fate of Palestine, they said this is a valid claim to the land. Namely, the fact that the Palestinians lived there for 1,000 years was not valid enough compared to the claim that I used to live here 2,000 years ago. So I start with this because I think that's very, very important. The other myths of the past, we talked a little bit about it, is all the myths around 1948. For instance, the Israelis still believe until today, and they write it in their books, that the Palestinians became refugees because the Arab world told the Palestinians to leave Palestine before they attack Israel after Israel was created in May 1948. As my work and other works of historians have showed, not one Palestinian left voluntarily. Palestinians were forcefully expelled, and that's why they became refugees. So that's about the past. About the more present reality, the myth of course, which is very important, that the Palestinian liberation movement is a terrorist movement, and you know, in Britain, in the 1970s, you could not talk about Palestine. If you said Palestine, it was equivalent to terrorism. And we see it coming back now, the attempt to say that whatever Palestinians do to defend themselves is pure terrorism. And I think that's an important myth to debunk, because like the FLN, the PLO, and like other liberation movements in the third world, these were anti-colonialist movements.
Absolutely.
And anti-colonialist movements have the right to fight for the liberation against colonialism. And it doesn't mean that they are terrorist organization, but it's the most difficult part was to convince the world that the PLO is as legitimate as the FLN, the Mao, the Viet Cong, all these liberation movements that eventually decolonized the world in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and so on. Now, some of the myths of the present are connected to the Oslo Accord. I challenge the fact that people say it's a peace effort in which Israel made a generous offer and the Palestinian expelled it. In fact, I was just watching before we came on the show here, France 24. The France 24, and they interviewed a professor who said that all the time the Palestinians reject generous Israeli offers, and included Oslo. This is a lie. Oslo was not a generous offer. Oslo was demanding from the Palestinians to continue the occupation and colonization in another way. I will finish with two relevant, I think, myths for our time.
Yeah.
One is that, as you know, people say if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semite.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a myth. That's a myth, because people either are stupid or ignorant, and they don't understand the difference between religion and ideology, or they're not stupid, but they want to silence you. And they know if I accuse you, if you live in France, and I say to you, as a Frenchman, if you were a Frenchman, I would say you're an anti-Semite because you criticize Israel. You would say, I don't need this headache. I don't want to be an anti-Semite. I know I'm not, but what do I need it? So I'll stop talking about Palestine. What do I need it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that they weaponized anti-Semitism. But I try to explain how big is the difference between Judaism and Zionism. It's like the difference between ISIS and Islam. It's not the same. And that's an important myth to debunk, the myth that Zionism and Judaism is the same. And finally, I think the idea that the best solution for Palestine is to partition Palestine, is a two-state solution, I think it's a myth, because that doesn't work. And I remember that when Palestinian intellectuals were asked in 1947, when the United Nations offered to partition Palestine to an Arab state and a Jewish state, and the Zionist movement accepted it, and the Palestinians rejected it. A Palestinian intellectual said to the United Nations, would you ask the Algerians to give half of Algeria to the French settlers as the best solution for the future? No, you won't.
Absolutely.
So why are you asking us to give half of our homeland to a settler movement? A settler movement that wants to destroy us. And I think this is also true. Partition is not going to work. It's not a good idea. It's not practical anymore anyway. But it's also not moral. And I think it's a myth that this is the only possible solution. There is a much better solution, and that's to build a one democratic state in Palestine.
Thank you, Ilan. Actually, we will talk now about a more recent event, so 7th of October, which has debunked other myths, the myths of the unbeatable army, mostly, and also it resulted in widespread awareness, particularly among the youths around the world. We have seen the protests all over the world about this genocide. And talking about genocide, you wrote a book in 2006. This book that I'm displaying now in the screen, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. it was like a premonition, because now everybody is talking about genocide. Last month I popped into an article in I think Middle East website or newspaper, where I read that this book has been stopped from printing despite surge in sales last November, December. And the publishing house claimed that they stopped printing it because the contract has expired. But also that has coincided with the publishing house being taken by Hachette, who is owned by a far rightist French Bolloré. So the coincidence was a bit striking. Yeah, my question to you is how was it a premonition, or how did you reach the conclusion that what was going on in Palestine was genocide, and you wrote this book in 2006? Was it a premonition? What was it? Because at that time few people were talking about this.
Yeah. Well, I mainly talked about ethnic cleansing, which is as bad as genocide. It's not always the same. So I think the genocidal policies were more towards this century. I think ethnic cleansing is a terrible crime against humanity, and it includes a lot of massacres. But the aim is to expel the people. Genocide, the aim is to eliminate them physically altogether. But I think I was right in the end of this book. I wrote that the book deals mainly of what Israel did in 1948. And when I wrote it in 2006, a lot of people said you cannot say that what happened in 1948 was ethnic cleansing. And I think the book convinced quite a lot of people that I made a very good case, that this is a classical case of ethnic cleansing. But in the end of the book, I said the most important fact about 1948 is that it was not a successful ethnic cleansing, because they only expelled half of the Palestinians, and they only took part of Palestine. And then I say in the book, after they took the whole of Palestine in 1967, they still were not able to get rid of all the Palestinians. And therefore, you know, the Palestinians have this term in Arabic, which they call al-Nakba al-Mustamirra, the ongoing Nakba.
Yes.
I say it's the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestine that has turned now into genocide as well. And I think that's very important. So it was very clear to me that when in 1948 there were enough people in the world, you know, people who worked in the International Red Cross, people who work in governments, people who worked in the United Nations, people who worked in the main journals, newspapers. There were enough people in 1948 that knew exactly what was going on in Palestine. And they decided to be silent. And they sent a message. They sent a message to Israel. In many other cases, ethnic cleansing is a crime that we will not tolerate. But in your case, you have a license for ethnic cleansing. Mainly because of the Holocaust, but not only because of the Holocaust. Also because the victims were Muslims mainly and Arabs. And I think that the message from the world was very important for the Israelis. They understood that if they continue with ethnic cleansing, unlike other countries who might find themselves under sanctions or condemned or become pariah state, like the apartheid South Africa, they will be okay, even if they do ethnic cleansing. I think what we learned today, that they believe that they can still be okay when they do more than ethnic cleansing, genocide.
Yes.
And this is very important to understand that if you want the ethnic cleansing and the genocide in Palestine to stop, the state of Israel has to change its ideology. As long as the ideology is Zionism, unfortunately, there is very little hope for in the future for stopping ethnic cleansing and genocide towards the Palestinians.
Yeah.
So you need to de-Zionize Israel, and it's part of the DNA of all the settler colonial movement. As I said before, there's a famous, with this I will end the answer, there's a famous scholar of settler colonialism, Patrick Wolf, an Australian. Unfortunately, he passed away. And he said all the settler colonial movements are motivated by the logic of the elimination of the native, and they don't rest until they eliminate the native.
You mentioned about the term genocide is an escalation of ethnic cleansing.
Yes.
And a matter of fact, 2 days back, there is Mr. Francis Boyle, international lawyer, who made a very strong statement. I hope, actually, a very encouraging statement. I hope he will be right. We will look at it after a couple of more questions on this book. So the ethnic cleansing was or is possible in a way thanks to the media hiding the facts. So, for example, what the publishing house of the book did by stopping printing it is kind of support to that to this ethnic cleansing. How do you see this evolving with the current state of the media around the world, with, for example, X and Elon Musk allowing some balanced information? And the other question is, do you see this ethnic cleansing genocide succeeding in the current state of the world?
Yeah, two good questions. First of all, I want to say that you're absolutely right about Fayard in France. I mean, the book came in French many years ago, The Ethnic Cleansing in Palestine. It came out in 20 languages. One of them was French. And it's not a coincidence that the new owner decided to stop publishing it. The good news, by the way, is that we found a new publisher, La Fabrique. So the French public will have a chance to read the book again. So it will be in the shops in France, thank God. So which shows you that all these attempts to silence us are doomed to fail. They will not succeed. But you're absolutely right. The media is still covering up, and now the media is not just newspapers; it's also the internet, and the internet is also controlled sometimes by multinational corporations led by people like Elon Musk and so on. But I think, unlike the old days, when the only source of information would be a newspaper, a radio station, maybe later one television station, it's very difficult to stop today the flow of information. And I think that's why we are witnessing a very important phenomenon that also relates to the second part of your question. I think I always say that today, I used to say in the past, but I think it's very true about today, that's what I meant, that there is two kinds of global alliances when it comes to Palestine. One, I call it global Israel. Global Israel is made of the governments of the global north, mainly, multinational corporations, security companies, of course, and some of the Jewish, not all, some of the Jewish community and a lot of the Christian Zionist community. And unfortunately, some governments also in the global south. And that's a global Israel. Namely, these are countries that don't, apart from the Christian Zionists, who do not ideologically believe in Israel, but they think that Israel is an asset and therefore give it immunity. But they are faced more and more with what I call global Palestine. Global Palestine is the coalition of the civil societies, of minorities, of countries in the global south, who are they themselves faced colonialism and oppression. And I think this coalition becomes stronger and stronger and has its own way to have the information, with all the attempts by Musk and others and this new owner of Fayard in Paris. They cannot stop people from knowing anymore what's going on. The world has changed. The world has changed. We know what's going on, and the more people know what goes on, it's more difficult for Israel to maintain its legitimacy, its support. Yes, it has the support of governments, unfortunately, and it has the support, of course, the most important support of the American administration. That's the most important support for Israel. However, if you look more deeply into the American society today, you can see there are undercurrents, there are processes in which the younger American generation is different in its attitude to Israel, including the young Jewish generation in America. They find it very difficult to identify with Israel. And many of them are, of these young Jews, are now the most active people in support of Palestine in the United States. So I think that in the long run, we will see this change where the civil society will begin to influence more seriously the policies of the government. The problem is that we need to find a way to shorten that period, because until we succeed of doing it, it's very difficult to stop the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Palestine.
Absolutely. And the matter of fact, you certainly know about the December Harris/Harvard poll in the US, where it showed that the young Americans, the age tranche between 18 to 25, were completely in support of Hamas, Palestine, independence, and so on. So that's a very good. It gives a very good hope for the future. So, and another encouraging item I wanted to share with you is the recent statement made by the international lawyer, veteran international lawyer, Mr. Francis Boyle. Let me find the video. Yeah, here it is. I will share it. So we will listen to what he said, and and I will ask you to comment on that, because it's quite interesting and encouraging. He's talking about the South Africa action against Israel in the International Court of Justice.
Okay.
Yeah, let's listen to it.
If you can explain why it's South Africa that's bringing this charge, and what exactly is the International Court of Justice, where it fits into the world justice system, and talk about the charge of genocide.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Amy. My best to your listening audience. Not to toot my own horn here, but I was the first lawyer ever to win anything under the Genocide Convention from the International Court of Justice that goes back to 1921. I single-handedly won 2 world court orders for the Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina against Yugoslavia to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide. And based on my careful review of all the documents so far submitted by the Republic of South Africa, I believe South Africa will win an order against Israel to cease and desist from committing all acts of genocide against the Palestinians. And then we will have an official determination by the International Court of Justice itself, the highest legal authority in the United Nations system, that genocide is going on. And under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, all contracting parties, 153 states, will then be obliged, quote, to prevent, unquote, the genocide by Israel against the Palestinians. Second, when the World Court gives this cease and desist order against Israel, the Biden administration will stand condemned under Article 3, Paragraph E of the Genocide Convention that criminalizes complicity in genocide. And clearly we know that the Biden administration has been aiding and abetting Israeli genocide against the Palestinians here for quite some time.
So yeah, so very, very encouraging and strong statement. We hope it's true. It's gonna happen. So what is your opinion? What is your take and what is your opinion on this?
Yeah, well, I'm not, unlike Professor Boyle, I'm not an international jurist, so I trust his, first of all, I trust his analysis. He definitely knows more than we do about it. It does seem from the composition of the court that at least an injunction, a temporary injunction, would be issued that would demand that Israel stop the genocide even before the whole procedure is completed, because the procedure in the ICJ can take longer, but they have the right to have a temporary injunction that compels Israel to stop. And he's right, because Israel has signed this convention. It is obliged by this convention. And all the other countries that signed the convention are obliged to follow the code. The problem is that the final action, and he doesn't mention it, Professor Boyle, the final action has to go to the Security Council of the United Nations. And we know what will happen there. We know what America would do. What he suggests, Boyle, and maybe he's right, he said, it's not, they may want to cast a veto, but according to the convention, they are themselves could be accused in complicity with the genocide, according to the clause 3. So I think it's a very important step, A. B, I think he's right. I think it's more likely that the accusation would be accepted than rejected, but of course you never know. One should be careful in prophesying here. And thirdly, at least in the short run, it would not influence Israel. Israel knows how to ignore international public opinion, but it will add to the pressure. It would add to the pressure, and I think it will be part of the process that eventually, but it will take long time, but eventually would bring a different reality in Israel and Palestine.
Excellent. Well, we are at 57 minutes, so we are as planned. I really appreciate the discussion with you, Ilan. I hope that we will have chance to meet when you are here in London.
I do hope so.
And I thank you again for accepting my invitation. I let you say last word, please.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would love to see you also in Algeria, hopefully one day.
Yes.
And I hope that to meet as many people. I have few students from Algeria, so I know a little bit about the country, and I love it. Yes, I do hope that we will be back to a Middle East and North Africa that used to be there, where people knew how to coexist. Not all the good things come from Europe. A lot of good things come from our area as well. We need to go back to these good things and build a better future for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ilan. Have a very good evening and speak soon, inshallah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for following us. Just as usual, just to let you know that after the show, by a few hours, YouTube will allow for subtitling in other languages, French and Arabic, so you can enjoy it in more comprehensive way later on. Thank you and good evening. Hope to see you soon. And مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.
احنا الشعب اللي تمشى بالحفاظ، عالشوك عجلي وعلى النار.
بن بولعيد واسمه مصطفى، علي لطوانت وبدي عمر. القصبة ما زالها واقفة وما زالوا عساس الدار، ما زالها سعلة السقيفة وما زالها حرمة الجار. انا يا بلادي راني عارف هما ما كانوش عارفين
دهشوا نهار علي ما توقف احنا عادتنا نموت واقفين نموت على النيف والشرف نموت على الوطن والدين علمنا بلا ريح يرفرف انا هما الجزائريين أنا يا بلادي على بالي هما ما كانوش فاهمين
حبوا يديو البلاد ديالي حسبونا ماناش قادرين فكتهم حسيبة بنبوع للجميلة تونسى الأخرين من حقك يا الجزائر تولولي ولدتي نساو رجال حرين أنا يا بلادي سمحيلي ما قدرتش نذكرهم كاملين
واش نذكر واش نخلي شهداء رواحهم طاهرين مازالهم في قلبي وفي بالي ربي يرحمهم أجمعين والقصبة مازالها ديالي وسط الدار والعرس واقفين
معليش يا القصبة وريلهم
قرصان رياس وساطيل على عروج وخير الدين احكي لهم
وفهم الناس اللي جاهلين
باللي الجزائر ما هيش ليهم ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين
باللي الجزائر ماشي ديالهم ولادها مازالهم عايشين في وسط الناس كيفاش تعرفهم في الشدة ديما متحدين